Thank you very much, honorable members. I think we have got the quorum now. We can start. Can I confirm that, Kurasha?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Good morning, honorable members, and welcome to the second session of the Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources, SADC PF. We want to take this opportunity to welcome you. We had a very fruitful discussion yesterday where we received two comprehensive reports from Ms. Chikondi Chavuta on the impact of COVID on food security in the SADC region. We also received a very comprehensive report from Mr. Joe Mzinga on the consideration of second biannual review report on African Union Commission on the implementation of Malabo Declaration on accelerated agricultural growth and transformation for shared prosperity and improved livelihoods. And we had very good discussion from honorable members and inputs, of which we put the recommendations as we finalized the day yesterday. Today, we're going to receive another presentation. The agenda is there, which is the impact of COVID on natural resource governance in the SADC region, what parliaments can do. We'll receive it from Mr. Titus Gwemende, the Southern African Regional Lead Natural Resource from Oxfam International. Can I take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Titus Gwemende to make the presentation?
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know if
you want to share the presentation?
Yes.
Russia?
Yes, Chair.
Can you assist in the sharing of presentation?
Sure, Chair. Mr. Gwemende, you have the right to share the screen. Just share the screen and you'll be able to have your presentation projected. If you don't win, let me know, then I can project it from this end.
Yeah, I've clicked share, but I'm not sure why it's not yet sharing.
While Kurasha is dealing with that, you can be doing introductory remarks.
Right.
We received the presentation from honorable members have received the presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable. And it's an honor and a privilege, honorable members, to be before you and to be speaking on an important topic that is emerging in our region. And that is how COVID is affecting natural resources in our region or in the continent in general. I will focus specifically on extractives, which is your mining, metals, oil and gas, and you will notice from the presentation that who we are as an organization, Oxfam. I'll probably just start with where we work. You've seen the map, and I will talk about if you can see the map. Basically, we work in every natural resource rich country on earth. just to give you a sense of the breadth of our experience. So where there is oil, where there is gas, where there is richness in natural resources, we're there. Our main programs are here: Johannesburg, Washington, Melbourne, Brazil, Hong Kong, you name it, in those countries. So what we do is to give support to governments, to civil society, to media house, work with companies to ensure that natural resources are used for the benefit of the majority of people. And we can start just by having a sense of the potential that the continent has had. I mean, this is something that we all know. I won't labor my point on this. This is one of the richest continents on earth, in fact, the richest. But having these resources doesn't mean they are commercially viable. But what we have is these are found in the ground. The question on whether all of these are viable commercially is a totally different question. I mean, you now have to get to the question around who wants it, how far is it from the main road, how much is it, how many years can you extract it. So sometimes I think people can overlearn this map, see diamond, see gold, cotton, iron, and as assumption is, well, we are trillionaires. It's much more complicated. I mean, you're as rich as the next person who wants to buy your material. So this is encouraging, but this is not enough. This speaks to the potential that we have in terms of minerals, oil, and diamonds. But this is just helpful. Maybe this is much more practical, which is the share of world mineral reserves in Africa. And this is quite fascinating because you can see your platinum group metals, your platinums, your ions, your stuff like that. We're doing very well, 96%. Your phosphate. Phosphate is what you need for fertilizer. Many of you are aware that Africa uses on average less than 10 kgs of phosphate-based fertilizer per hectare. If you compare that with the world average, which is about 100 kgs per hectare, you will notice that there is a reason why our productivity in agriculture has been very low. It's because of access to fertilizer. But the frustrating thing is Africa actually has 81% of the world reserves for phosphate, which means Africa should have enough fertilizer to increase our smallholder agriculture because we've got the phosphate. But the question is then why are we not doing that? And I will touch a little bit on that. But you can see cobalt, these are the green minerals, the sulfones, your dry, that's the future. So we have all these minerals that are critical to power the industrialization process, and we have them in spades. If you look at our share, other than coal and dominate. Other than coal and a few other,
private message.
We actually dominate. The next one is so this is basically how I'm going to approach this, and this is an overarching summary of my talk. I will look at the trends and the impacts, and I will look at the policy responses that are critical. It's difficult to exhaust this, and it's also important, I think, to mention that COVID is not telling us or didn't tell us something that we didn't know about Africa or about natural resources. What COVID does is to accentuate what has been there, accentuate certain weaknesses, accentuate certain inequalities, and accelerate certain processes that had already begun. So it is an important point to emphasize that we are not really learning new things about our resources through COVID. We have always known a lot of these things. But what COVID has done is to accelerate certain processes. I want you to remember that as we proceed with the presentation. Just look at this table. This is quite worrisome. I know it looks a little small in terms of font, but just pay particular attention to the red. The red speaks of danger. I mean, you could call it carnage on the continent going on right now. Literally every economy, I think the projections are negative for 2020. And for 2021, they're quite modest. I mean, for majority of African countries, for us to grow, at the kind of pace that we need to reduce poverty. We need 5, 6, 7, 10%. But a lot of the growth is going to be 1, 2, 3. So it's quite low. I mean, look at what IMF has approved in terms of emergency loans. It's quite negligible. Also look at fiscal projections. We are going to expenditure is going to far exceed revenues, which means we're going to be running budget deficits in a big way. Look at fiscal balances for oil producing countries, which is the table just beneath. So this is a worrisome a graph or picture of the fiscal position of the continent this year. Basically, we are experiencing massive economic contraction. UNECA estimates that we're going to lose about $60 billion in revenues. So that's what is happening. More specifically, you will look at the oil and gas picture. What we talk about licensing rounds is when you have your block of land and then you invite companies to bid, and then you license them so that they start exploring and extracting the gas and oil reserve. A lot of the licensing rounds for 2020 are now unlikely because of COVID. As you can see, the red basically means unlikely. So it means there is almost very little to no licensing rounds that are going to happen this year. What it means in layman's terms is even though you may have your gas or your oil in the ground, no one wants to deal with it. No one wants to touch it. So if it takes time for us to do licensing, it means you could add 2, 3, 4 years on top of the lead timeline that you have before you start production. So this speaks of delayed production. When you have delayed production, it means you have delayed revenues. So this is a very sad picture for countries like Mozambique, which are very rich in natural resources. But there is no action. It's all in the ground and nothing is happening. Look at all your countries there. The licensing rounds are very limited. The green, which is deeper, is the completed licensing rounds. Almost nothing going on. The next slide is even worse because it speaks to the price that we need in order to break even, for projects to break even. Almost majority of our projects right now, whether you look at Uganda, Ghana, Kenya, Angola, Mozambique, we are hitting the cost of oil or the cost of gas is lower than what we need in order to be breaking even. So that means at the moment, these are loss-making enterprise. So there's no company that's going to go onwards if it is not assured of profit. So what we now have is in northern Mozambique, there are delays. In almost all our countries, there are delays to production and to exploration because the price is just not right. So even if you have your oil, even if you have your gas, there is no point in proceeding because the price is just not there. It's like selling your maize at $2 a ton. Why would you sell? Then the problem then is if you keep keeping it, what happens? So this is a very sad picture. And this is owing to all COVID. Why this is happening is because no one is buying. You know, transportation worldwide is slowed down. No one is traveling. So if no one is traveling, it means demand disappears. If demand disappears, no one is buying. I'm sure you remember that in April, oil went to almost nothing per barrel. That was so bad. So that means if you had oil, you almost needed to pay other countries to buy it from you, which was almost historical. We've never seen that in decades. So the oil and gas picture is quite worrisome at the moment on the continent. This can give you even a more specific picture of what is happening. Some of you will look at Angola, Agogo, PAJ, Block 17. It's likely to be deferred. In other countries in the region, Mozambique, you can look at there, South Africa, Namibia, they're all possibly delayed, the exploration. This is all down to COVID. Next one. Metals, you know, we're talking about minerals, oil and gas. The same is metal. The funny thing is, during a crisis like this, gold goes up. A few days ago, gold was about $1,800 a kg. So that was actually quite good. The reason why that happens is in times of crisis, people run to gold. So people are looking for gold right now. So countries with gold are in a decent place, but everything else in metals, your zinc, your copper, your nickel, your iron ore, they are severely impacted. A lot of these projects are basically quiet. Yeah, so metals is pretty bad. One way of looking at the true impact of this is looking at the top mining companies in the world, and the top 20 mining companies have announced significant cuts in capex. Basically, it's your capital expenditure. You look at Glencore. I mean, these are countries that are in countries like Mozambique, like Zambia, Congo. Glencore is moving from 5 billion to 4 billion. To 4.5. Rio Tinto has cut capex by 1 billion. So basically, it also means less money circulating in the economy. So less productivity, less GDP growth. The question that comes to mind is we have to reflect on how this will affect declining prices, declining capex. It means less government revenues. When you have less government revenues, you mean you get increased budget deficits. And when you have increased budget deficits, you start having things like public anxieties because you can't spend on health, you can't spend on education, you can't pay civil servants decent salaries. And I don't know any African country right now which is happy with the salaries it is paying to civil servants. So you start having public anxieties. When you have public anxieties, our governments tend to borrowing. And when you borrow on punishing terms. And then when you borrow on punishing terms, you start renegotiating all kinds of things. So on the fiscal side, you have deficits, you are renegotiating with creditors, restructuring of bonds. And if you're an MP, this is the time to call for restructuring of loans. It's the time to call for cancellation of some debts altogether. Because the truth of the matter is there is no African countries that can emerge out of this. Looking at the kind of debts that we have for the resource-rich countries. So there is a lot of renegotiation of fiscal terms going on right now, and I'll speak to what MPs could do around that. So this is the financing of projects. How is it affecting employment? The COVID has found about 305 million jobs have been lost to COVID. Part of this is because mines have had to be closed. Licensing rounds have had to be delayed. If you delay, you can't keep staff if you're not going to be doing production. So jobs have disappeared, literally overnight. People were building hotels and apartments near licensing rounds, and you can't get your rent. There was a time when I moved to North Mozambique, and I was the first guest at a hotel in Palma. Massive 5-star hotel, very beautiful. It was 5 years ago. The assumption was money would quickly come, but money has not come. And so people are losing because they quickly moved in to invest. So jobs have been lost. Underground mining faces huge risks because when you are doing underground mining, you go down the shaft in lifts. So it's very easy to contract the virus. So mines have had to be closed because of that. It has affected sourcing of global inputs. As you know, in Africa, we have to source our machinery. They have to come by ship. We have to fly chemicals. We don't produce any of these things. So it has led to massive disruption of supply chains. Massive disruption of supply chains. Overall employment, closure of companies. There is research going on the true extent of the number of companies that have been closed. But this is quite some challenge. What does it mean? It means it is key to manage expectations around employment in mining industry. I think earlier on I said there's nothing that we are hearing or we are witnessing from COVID that we didn't know. One of the things that we've always known about COVID is about mining is mining doesn't have the kind of jobs that people think. You know, and there's politicians I know we tell constituents, you know, we're going to have mining and you're all going to get jobs. And the truth about mining and the truth about oil and gas is this is an industry that doesn't have enough jobs. I'll give you an example. At peak performance, up north in Mozambique, an LNG plant, I think, is going to have about 200 employees at peak. And of those 200, the majority of them are probably going to be expats. So there are very few jobs coming out of this. So it is important during COVID for politicians, for bureaucrats, for companies to be quite upfront with constituents. We are not just losing jobs. The truth is a lot of jobs in mining are never going to come back. In oil and gas, they're never going to come back. So let's manage expectations, particularly countries that are exploring. Malawi is exploring on the Lake Malawi, Zambia is exploring, Zimbabwe is exploring in Zarabani. There aren't enough jobs coming out of there. So let's manage those expectations. Sometimes politicians exaggerate potentials for that, and we need to deal with those things quite in the front. Systemic responses. What are the kinds of responses that are important as we face all these different challenges? And the key thing for me is COVID has to give us a moment to reflect on the structure of our economies. Maybe it goes beyond just tax and the jobs, but to the structure of our economies. Largely in Africa, a lot of our countries that rely on an extractives, we are basically exporting. You dig the resource and you export it in its raw form. What we call mine to sea. You will look even at the structure of our roads. Look at Zimbabwe or a lot of the countries that were colonized by the British. Your best roads are roads that link to the border or to the ocean. Because the reason why they were designed that way, it was basically to move your resource from the mine to the next port. And so then the question around is, how do we emerge from COVID? It means we have to restructure and remodel and move from being an entirely extractive, raw material producing country to a processing, industrialized country. That is a crucial point as we move from COVID. So localization is going to be crucial. If you notice that our countries can't even get masks, we have to import masks, so we have to import sanitizers. And a lot of countries have discovered, wait a minute, I mean, making sanitizer is a very simple thing. Making masks is a very simple thing. And of course, refining oil or polishing diamond is a very simple thing. Because people found themselves with ore or with a raw material no one buying, and with a raw material that you can't process because we have never invested in our economies to process. So governments now have to support measures to improve and strengthen the industrial base to allow local businesses to capture larger parts of mining procurement. In countries where you're told that you're going to have 5 billion in investment, you know what, we all talk about investment. 2014, I'm based in Maputo, so a lot of my examples are in Maputo. We got $5 billion in investment in 2014. But if I talk about FDI, that 5 billion, how much of it was captured on the local? It was very little. A lot of that money went to buy inputs abroad. So a company, for example, IMF gives you 5 billion. That 5 billion doesn't even come to your country. It goes straight to some supplier in France. So what comes here is a bill of 5 billion and machines that we can't even assess properly in terms of their costs. So we have to localize some supply chains, define or design a lot of this. Local content strategies, a lot of our countries don't have local content strategies. You're looking at Zambia. Right now, Mozambique has hired someone, Zimbabwe has repealed one, but generally we have very unclear local content laws and policies. And the MP in the COVID environment, their role is to advocate for local content policies. Local content policies speaks to the amount of locally acquired inputs in the value chain. So you're looking at employment, how many locals are employed in your companies? You're looking at procurement, how much of that is being procured locally? I won't give you a name of a country which imports drinking water to a mine, even including uniform for employees to wear. So these are things that can be sourced locally. Mining machinery. South Africa is a top 10 producer of mining machinery worldwide. So it is important to start thinking around what kind of supply chain can be localized. In fact, in the future, it is not so much important about the resource that you have. I'll give you an example of China. China doesn't produce lithium by itself. Lithium comes from Zimbabwe, from Chile, from Australia. But what China has is advanced processing capability to turn lithium concentrate into battery-grade lithium. But what Zimbabwe, for example, has is the actual lithium. But because Zimbabwe cannot process its lithium until it is battery-ready, you send your concentrate to China. So the real money comes from China. Zimbabwe will get about $800 a ton, but China will get $100,000 a ton because they can process. What happens when Zimbabwe starts training mining engineering to be able to process its own lithium? It means you get much more per ton. So the question around localization, local content is going to be crucial. What can you localize? What can we regionalize? There are some things that we can produce in Zimbabwe, but let's talk to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Uganda, so that we have a regional value chain around these things. So this is a very crucial thing as we emerge out of that. So that's your local content. Value addition, I mean, we have talked about this and it seems like old news, but this is quite crucial. Do you know there are 616 refineries worldwide, and out of those 616, Africa is less than 50. Basically, we are digging oil and importing it and exporting it just like that. So we need to construct new refineries, capacity for petrochemical plants. New refineries in Africa will need to be large and complex and serving regional needs, that's like that. But we cannot keep producing ore and oil without actually refining. This is for petroleum. I will give you another example for what it looks like in minerals. Look at minerals. Africa accounts for 50% of global contribution, but we only polish 10%. 10%. 0.5% of the jobs in global cutting, polishing, jewelry manufacturing sector. 0.5, but we're responsible for 50%. So factors for this is high operating costs, low consumption. South Africa is the largest market, but it tends to use 1% global diamond jewelry. So we produce something that we don't use. We produce something that we don't even seem to buy. And this is why a lot of people think diamonds are a problem. Look at iron, 4.2% for global production. And South Africa exports 90%. But when you look at iron, you are now looking at industry. You are looking at roads, bridges, hospitals. This is what we need to industrialize. But even that, we are not adding any value, even to our ore. And part of the reason this is happening is we lack the infrastructure. One of the things that is problematic on the continent is our governments are busy resurfacing the wrong roads. Instead of creating new roads, we are resurfacing old colonial tarred roads. And I'll give you an example for that. If you had a 600-kilometer road that basically was moving from your mine to the ocean, the solution is not to resurface it. The solution is to create a new road that allows you to be linked to other cities and countries. That then allows you to maximize on regional value chains. I was talking about phosphates, and I was saying the reason why Zambia, Kenya, Tanzania cannot work together and produce fertilizer, because they all have phosphate, they all have manganese, and they all have the required ingredients to produce fertilizer, is because the infrastructure that connects those three countries is not good. Look at the railway, look at the roads. So what ends up happening is it's easy for Kenya to find a road to ship the manganese and the phosphate to China than it is to combine with Tanzania and Zambia, so that the three countries can supply 90% of global phosphate fertilizer for agriculture. So the lack of infrastructure in terms of pipelines, roads, railways, terminals, water are a big problem. And a lot of people will say, but we've got water in Africa. We've got water, but the problem with our rivers is that they are not navigable. You're looking at your Congo River, your Karod, your Kariba, you've got your Zambezi. We have not found ways of ensuring that we can navigate or move products on our rivers. So until we have the technology either for railway lines or to move products on the rivers, it's going to be very difficult for us to maximize on some value chains. Gold, I think you all know about gold. And gold, the key issue that I'll probably talk about gold is the artisanal mining strategies. It is critical for the continent, for most of our countries. In fact, there are very few African countries which recognize and have a formal strategy for artisanal mining. We look at artisanal mining, we look at criminals. In fact, the irony for us as Africans is When you look at an artisanal miner, you see a criminal. But when you look at a big mining company, which doesn't pay tax, we look at professionals. But artisanal mining is where your African, your young woman is involved. There are more people employed in artisanal mining than you have in large-scale mining. So in terms of addressing poverty, if we formalize and support artisanal miners, give them more modern technology, that is a quick way of addressing poverty. When you give an example for Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe has a place called Chiadzwa, which is alluvial diamonds. Alluvial diamonds are diamonds that are quite close to the surface. You don't need sophisticated machinery for alluvial diamonds. Ordinary women and young people can dig for those diamonds and help in that. So instead of having a very complicated company, you have a small area where you allow young people to go and dig. Make sure it's regularized, make sure it's supported, make sure it's quite good, and ensure that people like diamonds, minerals like diamonds, gold, rubies, a small percentage, if you have 100 places, set aside 20 or a specific block for artisanal miners so that they can also work on that, beneficiate, polish, produce some of this. I think for gold, it's quite easy. The good thing is you can see the number of countries that have gold on the region. I mean, South Africa, I mean, Zimbabwe, Burkina Faso, with massive gold deposits. But we're not yet doing enough on that. And those are examples of what we would do with gold. The next one, a key emerging thing that has happened with COVID is, I don't know if you have noticed, when mines closed during COVID, you will notice that it disrupted productivity. And what a lot of mines have started to do is to replace human beings with machines, what we call automation. This is going to be accelerated because of COVID. What has worried companies is, so next time people are sick, it means we have to shut down the mine. No, what they're going to do is to accelerate the production of robots. So robots are going to be getting into these mines and not human beings. So massive jobs, a lot of the artisans that we were talking about. The future is not very good. So robotic mining is coming. Some people think this is not happening anytime soon. Syama gold mine in Malawi is the first already fully automated mine in the world. The second one is called Kankberg in Sweden. And I suspect South Africa is going to automate some mines because there's some good technology in South Africa. So what is now happening is automation, robotic mining, 3D printing. 3D printing of parts is companies used to import parts. Now you can print the parts on site or in situ. So the fourth industrial revolution is a revolution in how we do mining. The question is, how do countries and MPs respond to this? And the key issue is we must phase in the different technologies. You can't introduce robots on all mines in Africa. You're going to lose all jobs. But you also can't ignore the technology because it's going to affect your production, your cost profile, and you're not going to be competitive. So we have to phase in, sit down and say, what kind of technology do we need to adopt now? And how does this do it? So a portion of our revenues, instead of using them on elections or on salaries and expensive tax, is we have to invest it in training of skills that are usable in mining and other sectors. I'll give you an example of South Africa. A lot of you will know that what we call the University of Wits right now was initially called the South Africa School of Mines. This is what mining can do to skills development. Wits is nothing but a school of mine that is developed into a big university. But it was deliberate. A portion of money was being used in order to create new skills. So the people who are going to be made redundant in mines have to be useful somewhere. And the best way to do that is to have a portion of that mining revenue to retrain employees. Some of them could be redeployed into ASL. Some of them could be redeployed into other sectors where skill set is usable. If you're an accountant in a mine, you can still be an accountant in a food and beverages company. So reskilling is going to be important. The second one is going to be optimizing on upstream mining supplier industries. Africa has to start production of mining, capital equipment, chemicals, and engineering sectors. The actual jobs in the mining are disappearing in Botswana, in South Africa, in Uganda. There won't be jobs there. The jobs will be in the upstream or the supplier side. So guys who are into production of minerals, production of equipment, production of overalls, the food, those are the guys who are going to do well. And South Africa is already a good example because South Africa is ranked amongst the best in production of mining equipment, which is surprising because a lot of African countries, when we are buying mining equipment, we buy them from Germany. We have to start thinking in terms of regional value chains. Buy your equipment in South Africa instead of buying it from Germany or France. These are the regional kinds of thinking that we want. The next response is obviously around labor rights. I think the way jobs have been lost due to COVID has raised issues or questions around what do we do with labor on the continent? People just lose jobs and nothing else happens. So we have to start thinking around going back to labor. And the reason why I'm saying this is massive investment with our friends in BRICS countries, whom we have given lots of contracts, underneath. I will give you lots of, I don't know a country represented on this platform which has not had, some companies with one of the BRICS countries where the labor rights have been terrible. And COVID has just exposed how the question around labor rights is important. I think we've ignored. I could give you examples of shocking labor practices at lots of mines. BHP has established 25 million funds to support its own contractors, and it has been very important. So programs around reskilling, training, instead of allowing countries, and this is what companies are doing, and I'll give you companies like ENI, countries like Rio Tinto, companies like Rio Tinto, what they do is they give scholarships to staff to go and get trained in Australian universities. Or if you're ENI, you're given scholarships to go and get trained in Italy. If you think about it, it sounds smart, and there is a point in which it is smart. But in the future, you want to have a situation where you invest that money in your local university. So instead of having one person graduating with a master's, you have 5. So you want to localize the training of skill set, because the vast majority of people working on mines are trained in your universities. So instead of ignoring your universities while sending people on scholarships, let's work with companies so that they invest in the local university, so that it is strong, it produces degrees that are relevant to extractives. In the long term, that is good. But the question around labor rights, the question around how employees work with protective equipment, being paid even though when there is a crisis, it is a crucial thing. And MPs need to fight for labor rights during COVID. The next thing, transition to cleaner energy. When oil prices collapsed, Nigeria, Angola, Kenya, Congo, Brazzaville, I mean, these countries really suffered. And so we didn't discover that we are transitioning to cleaner energy. We've always known that. But the urgency of transition to cleaner sources of energy is much stronger now. And it is important for our governments to have champions around the transition to renewable energy. One of the most shocking things on the continent is we have sun 365 days on the continent, but we don't have meaningful solar energy being tapped. And yet, the guys who are doing well in this are countries where there is rain and snow, Germany, Netherlands, small flat countries with terrible weather. But you go to Mozambique, which is high temperatures. You go to Zimbabwe, you go to Congo, you go to Botswana with a massive desert. And you ask yourself, is on the national grid, what is the percentage of your power that comes from solar? It's very little. So let's maximize on the fact that the sun is everywhere and start to say, listen, let's move beyond importing solar panels to China to say, we've got the actual natural resource, which is the sun. That's number one. Number two, we've got to start to invest in technologies around solar themselves. So Africa should be leading on production of solar equipment, not just buying cheap solar panels from different countries. So they should be involved, governments should be involved in every aspect of wind and solar. That is the invention, development, manufacturing, and deployment of green energy. Parliament buildings should be fired by solar. Hospitals should be fired by solar. Universities should be fired by solar. The little that you get from coal, maybe it can fire industries. Agriculture. When you look at countries like the shape of Mozambique is very long, it's almost like a rectangle. So it's going to take a long time for a country like Mozambique to connect everyone from Nyasa, Zambezia, down here to Maputo. It's going to be very difficult. the quickest way is going to be solar. So give all kinds of protections to companies and suppliers and credits so that we promote the use of solars on farms and on basic institutions, embassies and stuff like that. But the state has to lead on that. History shows that the countries that are doing well on renewables, it is the state that has done that. The best country on renewables right now is China. But do you know who is taking the initiative? It is the state. So the role of the state is going to be crucial as we move post-COVID, because the assumption that we have been told is that, well, leave it to private sector, they know what is right. I can tell you there's not a single country that is doing well on solar where the private sector took the initiative. It is because what the private sector does is to get into an area which has less risks. It is government that has to take risk and create markets, and the private sector can jump in later. It's a crucial point that we can discuss later, and I'll give you examples of how there is evidence that it is the state that has to take that risk if anything has to happen on that. Germany, Norway, Costa Rica is now running on solar and everything like that. African states must seize that moment. What we're talking about clean energy isn't just around energy, it's also geopolitical. Unlike fossil fuels, renewables are ubiquitous. It's not just about Middle East here. So renewables are going to reconfigure and democratize power on the international geopolitical landscape. This is important because power and ownership patterns of fossil fuels should not be reproduced in the clean energy sector. The reason why I'm saying that is you will all remember that oil prices collapsed because of a fight between Saudi Arabia and Russia. The whole world suffered because two countries had not agreed. Now, when you move to solar, you won't have to be held captive by two countries. So you are democratizing power and reordering the geopolitical landscape on the continent. So the less you want to be dependent on a country, you have to reinvest in clean energy. The next crucial issue, obviously, is going to be we have to improve governance of the sector itself, the broader governance. Increased fiscal pressures require greater transparency and inclusivity in decision-making. I think I mentioned that we are busy taking loans right now. We are busy borrowing because we are squeezed, our governments are in trouble, so we're busy looking for loans. The challenge when a government is desperate is we're going to accept loans on terrible terms. So if you're a member of parliament, this is the time for us to insist on revenue, loan, and contract transparency. A desperate man is a poor negotiator. From the biblical times right up to now, some of the worst deals that were signed by our countries were deals that were signed either when we were starting mining oil or when we were starting or when we were broke. And so it is important for the legislator to insist on loan transparency. Loans must be approved in parliament, not read in parliament, but approved in parliament. Contracts, terms between mining companies should be known by an MP. So the legislator must be vigilant. No rubber stamping of loan terms whose terms complicate recovery. Past transparency laws as provided for by the SADC Regional Mining Vision, Africa Mining Vision, EHI, enhance capacity of oversight for legislator, revenue authority, which is why it is such an honor for us to be having this discussion on this FUNDRA committee. Because when we have MPs who are much more attuned about what is happening in the sector, we are going to have less rubber stamping of bills within our parliaments. Next one. Right, so in conclusion, basically to reiterate the things that I've said, COVID has been terrible. I think we've seen, it's not that we've seen a lot of people dying, but we've seen maybe the death of industries, the death of old thinking. So we're going to emerge from COVID as our countries, especially in SADC, we have to restructure and reorder the way our economies are done. We have to move from being resource material exporting countries to industrialized countries whose bases are clean energy and industrial sectors that are boosted and led by the state. The next key thing is we will have to improve our governance. Contract and loan transparency is now standard practice. I think they are, I mean, go to Zambia, go to Senegal, I could give you, go to Burkina Faso, go to Ghana right now. I don't need to know the agreement between Newmont and government of Ghana. It's online. It's not a secret. I'm talking about countries on our continent. It shouldn't be a secret what the agreement is between SINOC and the government of Angola or the government of Zimbabwe. I mean, this is an old paradigm. So insisting on transparency and accountability is going to be crucial because governments are making tricky decisions right now. The key thing and the way forward, if you are an MP, is obviously around the regional mining vision. Last year, the regional mining vision was approved, and it is crucial for our local parliaments to start to reflect those agreements. Provisions within the regional mining vision need to be in our laws, so let's push that. Local content laws, things like that. Diversification. Communities are central. As communities are losing jobs, companies are beginning to cut corners. So making sure that extractors are around communities is going to be crucial. It is in the self-interest of companies and governments to respect and protect community rights. The last thing is on climate change. There is no human development on an uninhabitable climate. So Africa has to embrace and leverage the green revolution for economic transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are clapping hands. It's just that we are in a virtual platform. We can't clap like. Thank you very much for such a insightful presentation. Indeed, Mr. Gwamende, you touched quite a number of critical areas where, as we speak, looking at the presentation, we are a very rich continent but poor. If you are to summarize your presentation, a very rich continent but poor continent. Those are the contradictions that we need to grapple with. You touched quite a number of areas, and we will allow honorable members to make inputs. In the chat there is a place where you can raise your hand. If you can't raise your hand from you can raise it physically. I will see if you are on the platform. I see the hand of Honorable Majaga. I see the hand of Honorable Majaga. From the raise of hand function, I don't see any other hand. Those whose connection are not okay, they can indicate verbally to say, I want to speak. I'll give you an opportunity. And Kurasha, you will also be looking at people who are raising their hands as Honorable Majaga will be continuing. Honorable Majaga.
Thank you, Master of Ceremony. I think you can hear me properly.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Let me start by greeting everyone, Master of Ceremony and other honorable members and all our resource people, and thank the presenter for the good work which you have done. Actually, is very true. The first issue as honorable members in our various parliament, we ought now to change, to shift, to start by looking at our laws and our policy, locally and regionally, and Africa as a whole, so that we align some if needs arise. The other thing, again, we must visit our school curriculum. Fourth industrial revolution will need us as MPs to see and liaise with our Ministry of Education in our various parliament, so that we align ourselves and our education to those changes, so that in the future, we must be knowing where our economies, our professionals will be needed most and where we are heading. So we need to see our school curriculum starting as far as primary up to the tertiary, so that now we won't be saying the universities are just producing, for example, teachers only. We ought to have people who could transform and come up with other measures and make our economy great again. And I think this COVID-19 pandemic, it was just a wake-up calls for us, like the presenter did allude earlier. It's not something new, as we have been having such pandemics like Ebola, HIV. But this one was as well adding a wake-up call on us as legislators and as a continent, especially Africa, which by far we have seen in the graph that a lot of minerals which are running this world in terms of economy are found in Africa and in our respective countries. So now we ought to have some regional hubs whereby all our resources will be categorized according to the sectors, whether mining, in terms of mining, diamonds and gold. Maybe we have a hub. Those who are producing small quantities, we get up as a regional producer in terms of their production. They will be sending those minerals to the countries which will be selected. So actually we must change a lot of things, but to start with us as legislators to advocate and to change and to make lessons wherever we are and in our countries and our regional bodies like SADC and BOPAP, so that we see how best in the future we can even transform all those things to be an African parliament like we see European, whereby now we have seen that it happened during the era of Britain and European country for Britain to come out from the European Union. So all those kind of things, we ought to see now that we must align and open up for a more dialogues as fellow countries, so that in the long run, all those things like both solar, heat, which we have, we must now try to, what we have, we must try to improve it with a lesser cost and make use of it for the benefit of our people, so that in the past it will be okay. So let me stop there. I will interject if anything arises to give other fellow parliamentarians a chance to debate this interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other members who wants to make a contribution? You can raise a hand physically, or you say, I want to speak. Kurasha,
There's Honorable Mpanza, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Mpanza.
Thank you, Chair. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again to the presenter for quite an enriching presentation. I think I want to echo the colleague from Botswana, the previous speaker. As Africa, we sort of need to reform our education sector. We need to, because for us to be able to exploit our mineral resources, we need to have some pool of engineers that would be able even to work even on the mines and to look at ways in which we can, because after production, I mean, if we extract the mineral resources, we need to take them for production, and we should be able to have the capacity to take all of the different steps, maybe from extracting whatever mineral underground to processing to refinery. But sometimes you find that our countries, most particular the SADC region, we seem not to get more engineers out of our schools. And most of the countries, in my country in particular, Kingdom of Eswatini, being colonized by the British, we are more on seeing children passing English, even if they can be very good in the science subjects, but we more on them passing English. And if they fail English, then they become nothing. Yet that is why we get engineers. I think we need to go to some kind of reformative education system and get more engineers so that you can be able to exploit our own resources, without which the people from across the world will continue to exploit our resources, and we end up being beggars. So I think I want to echo the submission from the previous is to look at the education, bring up the different engineers in different perspectives, and maybe we can then move on to see if that we can actually make different productions from the different mineral resources we have. That is a comment I wanted to make. I don't have a question. The presentation was quite good for me and quite enriching. And thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbanza. I'm checking if Kurasha, we have any other member who wants to make a contribution. I see the video of Honorable Tsepang. You want to make a contribution?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. I don't even have any questions. This was a beautiful, a very informative presentation. And I think it sort of really gave a new dimension on how we should look at the extractive industries post or vis-a-vis COVID-19. And I've just been wondering to myself, although I think this would be a general concern, not only for this presentation, but we have granted as members of parliament, there's a chance that some of us may ultimately get into the executive and be in a position to make decisions regarding our various nations. But I'm just wondering if, for example, Oxfam has had the opportunity to impart this crucial information to the executives in our SADC region, for example, because I know that there would be other forums where ministers would be engaging on such issues. And if us and them are of the same understanding, then the pressure that we feel this side can easily translate into implementable actions when the executive is informed. That's why I'm saying it's not necessarily for Oxfam alone, but since we're getting so many insightful presentations, it's very concerning that we are on the same wavelength with our executive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I will also do my contribution so that when you respond to all areas, while Kurasha will be checking any other member who would want to make a contribution. I think like I said, it's quite a very insightful presentation. One area that I think we need to look into, Mr. Gwemende, is the issue of first localization. before we can even move to regional, because we are unable to localize before we move to regionalization. Our education system, I think it assists us to extract resources. There must be a change of perception within our education system that says we focus more on industrialization in our different countries at a local level, so that whatever minerals that we extract, like in South Africa, as you put it, all the roads that goes to Richards Bay, to your Durban, harbors, to the all of them, the infrastructure is good because it needs to transport raw material to outside country. If we start by localization, then we look at clustering in terms of what are the areas that we need to cluster. For example, let's put gas extraction, even though it is limited because of COVID. You have got Mozambique, you have got South Africa. You can put a cluster in SADC region of countries that produces gas, and then that production is done at a regional level, at an integrated level regionally, and then it is able to assist. That you can also do with any other mineral, for example, diamond. Diamond is there in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, and other SADC countries. You cluster them to say, these are the minerals that are found in these countries. How can we assist them in terms of making sure that we add value to each and every mineral that is there? All our countries are, if we are to compare our countries in terms of climate change adaptation, you'll find that we're still lagging. But you put a very clear point there in terms of the solar. What are we doing? All the SADC regions are rich in terms of solar. What is it that we can do at a regional level to be able to deal with that? I think it's also one area that we can explore and assist in terms of the putting back our economy, having cleaner energy, assisting in creating employment opportunities for our people. Because while mining might not give us as many jobs as we want, but projects like climate adaptation might give us more jobs that can assist in terms of employment. Because the more our people are not having jobs, Mr. Gwemende, the more we have challenges in our different countries, because they will not keep quiet when they're not getting employment opportunities. I think there are quite a number of areas that we can learn. COVID has taught us that when they want to, African countries now through the AU, when they're buying products, they're using a same area where they're buying in bulk, so that they can also be able to negotiate. That can be translated into regions, so that whatever we want to buy, if we want to buy combined as SADC regions and clusters, we can be able to do that. We'll buy at a cheaper price rather than one country going alone, or buying at a local level, being able to produce. There are countries that can be able to produce masks, that can be able to produce sanitizers. We have got areas, for example, in our country, the Denel, they are doing these ventilators. So those are areas that we can look and localize in our area and at a regional level, and be able to say, instead of going to buy a ventilator we assist one another as SADC countries. People are able to buy ventilators, sanitizers at a very local level and be able to be assisted. So we'll give you an opportunity to comment. Russia, we can also check if we have got any hands or any comments from our partners.
Not yet, Chair. Probably they are still pondering. Maybe we can have a response and see thereafter if there will be any further questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gwemet.
Thank you very much, Chair. These are all very useful. These are all very useful reflections. Things came up about clustering, Mr. Chair. If I can start with what you said, it's such a crucial element because of information and power asymmetry. Now, was it last year or 2 years ago, if you remember, Chairman Xi Jinping, the President of China, went to Europe to speak to President Macron. And if you remember what President Macron, it was a meeting for France, but he quickly went to convene a meeting which involved Jean-Claude Juncker and the Chancellor Merkel. So Macron appeared in a picture with China, Xi Jinping, the EU chair by then, Jean-Claude Juncker, Macron and Merkel. That was one of the most powerful statements for me as I was thinking, because what you're hearing there is clustering. Macron was saying, I cannot take on China on my own. France is too small to take on China on its own. But when France combines with Germany and EU, we can engage China on a much more level playing field. The challenge we are having on the continent right now is Malawi with 15 billion GDP is trying to negotiate uranium contracts with a $15 trillion country. You're going to be smoked. I mean, this is why we have such terrible contracts. $15 billion GDP economies dealing with $600 billion economies. Even though you are smart and patriotic, it's very difficult. I mean, you can be overwhelmed by the number of lawyers that you're talking about. They can overwhelm you with court cases. I mean, they can go to court and bleed you until you basically can sink. So the question around asymmetry is we are dealing with power asymmetry. The question around clustering is we're dealing with power and we're improving our ability to negotiate. And so when we start clustering, look at what has happened with cocoa. When Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and all these things said, we all produce cocoa and we dominate the world market. If the three of us as African countries combine, we can dictate the price of cocoa. The problem in Africa is while we produce a lot of these minerals, we don't dictate the price because each one is doing it on their own. So the question around, let's do a diamond cluster, let's do a platinum cluster, because when you look at platinum, if South Africa and Zimbabwe, and I think is it Botswana, if we can combine, we can dictate the price of platinum. And we all know that in terms of hydrogen fuel cell economy, platinum is the catalyst. So South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Botswana could actually dominate the world markets on hydrogen fuel cell economy if we can work together. I could give on and on. The price of diamond can be dictated in Africa. The price of all the PGMs we can dictate in Africa. So we also, it's not a question of having the resource. It's also Pan-African thinking, which is manifested through regional integration. That is a crucial point. The second point is around education. And this you know because you are all MPs and you work as bureaucrats. One of the frustrating things when you look at the structure of our governments is how we are educated. So you'll find the permanent secretary, he went to Russia for his master's, and then one went to Harvard, did his PhD in economics. Another went to University of Ibadan, and another went to University of Zimbabwe. Ideologically, these are all black people in Lesotho working in one government, but they are wired completely different. In fact, they don't even respect the way they think. Go to US right now. If you're going to work in the White House, there are top 3 universities which explain almost everyone in the White House, in Congress they go. Harvard is not just prestige, it is ideology. Part of the challenge is we're having people who work in the same government, but they don't operate from the same ideological underpinning. And you have a government that gets assistance from IMF, then gets assistance from AFDB, then gets assistance from its own ruling party. So even the kind of advice that we're receiving is also ideologically contradictory. It has to be implemented by bureaucrats whose own training is contradictory. So it's not enough to just unleash and you say, okay, so we have Honorable Matibe, he's a qualified guy, PhD, he went to Edinburgh, qualified. No, we have to start getting to a point where we say, how is the African bureaucrat trained? Who trains them and where? And have schools in which all our bureaucrats attend so that we know that there is the same ideological thinking, the same energy that permeates in our thinking. And then we go to Singapore. Who works in the Singapore government? Go to US. I want to challenge you, go to US, you will not find 20% of the people they were trained in University of Peking. I can tell you, it is not possible. It's only in Africa where you sit in cabinet with 20 ministers and 20 countries training. Totally different. Marxist, Keynesian, and stuff like that. So let's sort, the education isn't just having good degrees. Where are you trained? How are you doing it? Which is why I was saying, I'm worried when almost all our engineers are being taken to Italy and Germany for training for masters. It's good. It's a foreign masters, it's very good. But let's build the African university the way it was during the war. You remember during the war, it was the Dar es Salaam school, University of Dar es Salaam, University of Ibadan, University of Zimbabwe. They were key universities where our liberation fighters were trained. It was not an accident. There was an ethos in these schools. And we have to start to create an ethos in our African university, which can create a cadre or an African bureaucrat that thinks industrialization, that has a clear view on the role of government. Now, as we are emerging out of COVID, the role of government, like I was saying, is going to be crucial. What is the role of government in a reconstruction or in recovery? And I'll tell you what we have learned. We have been told that the government should regulate markets, and this is what we've been told. No, the government has no business. Just leave companies and civil society or and the private sector to do that. The question is, if we do that even in COVID, then we are in trouble. The countries that have succeeded in dealing with COVID are countries with a strong state. I'm not saying tyrannical state. I'm talking about a strong state, a state that has capacity and that is rich to do certain things. Tell me any country that has won against COVID, they had a strong state. And so we have to all aspire towards a democratic development of state which is entrepreneurial, a state which doesn't just regulate markets, but a state that can create markets, regulate market, and support markets. What is the example? The example of a strong state is America. All of you are holding cell phones right now. Your GPS, who started the GPS? It is not Silicon Valley. It was the government of America. How about the iPhone? How about solar? How about internet? Who invented the internet? It was not a private sector company. It is only in Africa where we're waiting on private sector companies to do miracles, invent things and start. There are no companies that have invented anything that is worth talking about. Companies go to sectors that are risk-free. It is the government that removes risks, then companies move in. This is a point that almost people don't realize. But when you look at the US, all these things that I'm talking about, they were invented by the government. It was military, US intelligence, or government grants. Those are the companies that actually created and shaped markets. And then companies moved in and said, now we have solar. Companies are now making solar panels. Companies are now making Android and stuff. But when the internet was being made, it was a risky bet. No one knew what the internet was. But it was the government of America that did that. So for me, the reason why we have not done all this localization, Mr. Chairman, is not because it's bad, no. It's because the government of Africa have been waiting for private sector to do something. Yet it is the government that must be capable, democratic, and competent to create markets, to invent things, to invest money in new research. Unless the government does that, these things are not going to happen. So localization is a product of government policy. Localization is a product of coherent education. Localization is also a product of political economy. Now, when we start saying, let's localize, Mr. Chairman, you are saying, instead of buying something from Germany, buy it from South Africa. You are going to be in trouble with the chairman, with the German ambassador. Because this is now, we are talking political economy here. Because we are saying for Africa to continue, we have to disrupt profit margins of some countries. So there's a political economy of localization that we have to unpack. It's not because our government are stupid. It's because you go to negotiate a debt deal with the IMF. IMF will tell you that, oh, okay, that's fine. You need to get, we're going to bail you out. We're going to give you 1 billion. But for you to get that 1 billion, I think you need to get supplies from us. So we're going to supply you. So an American government is going, an American bank is going to give you money, but you're going to give contracts to American banks. This is what happens with all our contracts. That's what I was saying, contracts should be out there. So if you're Mozambique, you're told, well, you're going to get a loan from, say, Credit Suisse, but get the machinery from a European country called France. Rarely are you going to get funding in post-COVID debt negotiation, where, Mr. Chairman, your government gets $2 billion loan, and then you are left to negotiate sourcing of things in your country. It's going to be difficult. So our ability to negotiate and mobilize the resources domestically is crucial, because the monies that we are borrowing are the monies that are influencing domestic policy, which is why I get worried with a recovery program that is entirely based with foreign direct investment. Because foreign direct investment isn't just good for you, it's a way of shaping domestic policy. A government has to first be clear around a recovery program, and then we look for money that makes sense, which is called strategic foreign direct investment. Don't just accept all kinds of investment. No, 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 no. Specific investment around improving your own technology. Right now, some of us have been having government relations with China since the war. But it was a relationship around China building a building for you and then giving you boreholes and giving you money for masks. But we have not bothered China and say, China, in our relationship, comrade, you need to give us processing capability for lithium. Zimbabwe is Africa's largest lithium producer. And China has the best lithium processing capability worldwide. Zimbabwe and China have a very good relationship. What I always wonder is when Zimbabwe and China negotiate, how come this never comes on the table? To say we're going to give you this, but also give us the technology to process our own lithium. It never comes up. Our relationship with China ends up being, okay, we're going to build you this hospital here, and then we also get a mine here. We are not asking the right things from our creditors, from our friends, and things like that. So, Mr. Chairman, it's a big issue. I mean, we can continue going on, but it's a crucial issue. Last issue, Honorable Masena, around executive consent. You are going to be the ministers and the bureaucrats, so let's start with you guys. We can find or create platforms in which members are there, ministers are there, and we've had such spaces where, in fact, we've had spaces where you have former presidents, you've got ministers and you've got MPs, and create a platform where you have this engagement. But ultimately, we believe in the power of parliament to hold the executive to account. Bills must stop passing through parliament. They should be passed in parliament. But at the moment, because of the whipping system, they say bills pass, just passing through your parliament. We have to, our parliaments have to start having teeth. We have to call the executive to, and this is now political dynamics in each country that I can't speak to. But there's no one who can do that but us. This is something that we have to resolve internally in our ruling parties and in our parliaments. We have to start holding executive to account. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gwemende. I think Russia, I don't see any other hand. I can only allow the Secretary General to have remarks, and then you do the recommendations. The Secretary General is fine, Russia. Can you deal with the recommendations so that we can move to the next item on the agenda?
Thank you, Chair. It's been mouthful, but I will try to tackle some of the key recommendations that emerged from the meeting. The first one, Chair, relates to the need to step back and reflect on the structure of our economies post-COVID, to make sure that we have the right architecture of institutions that are able to help our countries and our economies to emerge out of this crisis. The second important recommendation relates to localization and also building sustainable regional value chains. We need to leverage on local capacities in view of the disruptions we saw with COVID, which rendered our economies difficult to function on account of being unable to access whatever we are used to access from beyond the local setting and beyond the region. The third point, Chair, relates to the need to reconfigure and rethink the infrastructure that supports our economies. We have tended to maintain infrastructure that is designed to serve a political and economic purpose that is not necessarily related to what we are dealing with today. When the point of localization and building local capacities, one also illuminating point that stood out is the issue of how we look at, for instance, the role of artisanal miners who often are criminalized when we could leverage on the local capacities and be able to benefit them in terms of employment and in terms of poverty. The other important point, Chair, is the issue of the utilization of revenues from the extractives to reskill the employees in order to address a twin challenge of the automation of the extractive industry, but also making these skills relevant to upstream the economy. Another important recommendation that emerged here is the issue of labor rights, in particular against the background of poor labor practices that we have seen as a trend with BRICS investment. Another recommendation relates to transition to clean energy, which also links to climate governance. Last point, Chair, relates to improved governance of the entire extractive sector, in particular the role of Parliament in ensuring that there is transparency, which is already embedded within the SADC mining vision. And take home for me, Chair, is a clarion call for Parliament to be seen on the forefront of clean energy and climate governance. We need to see our parliaments with solar on their roof. And I hope the Chair will make this recommendation to plenary, and we set timelines as a demonstration of the commitment to clean energy in the region. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kurashia. Those were the recommendations. And thank you very much, Mr. Gwemede, for such a presentation. We could not stop talking. It was quite a very interesting topic to discuss. You can discuss it the whole day. There are quite a number of areas that you raised as you were responding that needs further engagements on, which I think from the desk of Secretariat, they will look into that so that in terms of any further engagements that we need to have with yourself, those are the areas that we need to look into. I want to take this opportunity, Kurasha, if there are no further hands that I see there, to thank the honorable members. I think we are moving to another category of processes. Take this opportunity to thank members. I have been the chair, SG, I have been the chair of this committee, having had to come into to replace Mr. Mukhalapa. And I've had nice engagements with the members of the committee and yourself from Secretariat, the support that you gave me while I was chairing. I would say that whoever is going to be appointed or elected today, you must give them the support that you also gave me while I was chairing this committee. It was quite a very wonderful experience to chair this committee, because this committee, in my view, is the one that can change the dynamics, the geopolitical dynamics in our SADC region. If we look at the areas that we look into, your food, agriculture, and natural resources, those are the key areas that can assist us to alleviate poverty in our region, create employment opportunities for people in our region. For that, I want to thank you very much, SG. The process that comes follow now is in your hands, SG. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. SG, are you in the house?
Yes, sir.
You have the floor if you wish, SG, as we transit to the next activity.
Okay. Honorable members, good morning. It's still a good morning. Bonjour, bon dia, dumela. Thank you so much, Chair. We really also appreciate the cardinal role that this committee can play and should play in mobilizing parliaments at the regional level, and also, catalyzing our citizens to have a say in most of the policies that our governments are grappling with. And we definitely have enjoyed your leadership. We have learned a lot from you as well, and we will continue to serve this committee as best as we can from the Secretariat. Thank you for those kind words. And at this point, Chair, we are moving on to the elections. And I will hand over to the returning officer, Mr. Sheldon Kurasha, to basically take us through the guidelines that are provided for us in the elections, and to also give you guidance around the voting system that we use. And I don't know if we need to we will allow for an opportunity for those who have been elected at the end to have a few words as we conclude our session. So Chair, through you, let me hand over to the returning officer.
Thank you very much, SG. And honorable members, we are coming towards the end of the meeting. And the last item we have is the item on elections for our office bearers, namely the chairperson and vice chairperson for the next 2 years, 2020 to 2022. I wish to present to you the procedure for how we will conduct the election. In the introduction, we highlight the fact that the tenure for the current chairperson and vice is ending now at the conclusion of the meeting. These assumed the office in 2018 and served for 2 years. And in terms of our rules of procedure, Rule 39 of the rules of procedure states that each committee shall elect a chairperson and vice chairperson. Sub-rule 2, the chairperson of a standing committee shall preside over all meetings of the committee. In his or her absence, the vice chairperson shall assume those duties. And in the absence of the vice chairperson, a member designated by the committee shall preside over the committee on an interim basis. There is also a provision relating to rotation, which is contained in Article 14.3 of the SADC Constitution, and it provides that members of the standing committee holding the position of chairperson or vice chairperson shall retire by rotation, meaning that a member parliament with members serving in the positions of chairperson or vice chairperson of a standing committee shall not be eligible for re-election to the positions in the immediate subsequent term. This rule is meant to avoid what was termed circulation of members in one incident of precedence relating to rotation. There is also a provision relating to gender principle contained in Rule 38, sub-Rule 5, and it provides as follows: as far as it is practically possible, gender considerations shall be taken into account when deciding chairpersonship of committees. Where the chairperson is of a committee is a woman, the vice shall be a man, and vice versa. Honorable members, when we look at the schedule of the history of chairpersons and vice chairpersons for the Funding Committee, and it dates back to recently, to 2014, when the committee was established after the repealing of the old rules and constitution. We have the following countries that served from for the 2014 to 2016. The chairperson was from Mauritius, and the vice chairperson was from Lesotho. During the 2016 to 2018 tenure, the chairperson was from Zimbabwe, and the vice chair was from Mauritius. And currently, 2018 to 2020, the chairperson is from South Africa and the vice is from Namibia. And to assist the members to make decisions as we go into elections, we have also developed a table summarizing the countries that are eligible and those that are ineligible. And the countries are given their honorable members for the position of chairperson. Ineligible countries are Mauritius, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Namibia on account of being the outgoing vice chairperson. This makes Angola, Botswana, DRC, Eswatini, Lesotho, Madagascar, Malawi, Mozambique, Seychelles, Tanzania, and Zambia eligible. For the position of vice chairperson, the ineligible countries are Lesotho, Mauritius, Namibia, South Africa on account of being the outgoing chairperson, and this leaves Angola, DRC, Botswana, Eswatini, Madagascar, Malawi, Mozambique, Seychelles, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe eligible. Having laid out the procedure in terms of eligibility, we will proceed to receive nominations for each of the two positions. And in terms of the rules, if one member is nominated, we shall declare that member duly elected unanimously to become chairperson. But if there are more than one nomination, we will have to conduct an election.
Remember those letters on the transformation. Sorry.
May you mute? Thank you. So we will proceed to have elections, and each member will be entitled to one vote. And honorable members and partners, I wish to highlight that only members of parliament are eligible for election and eligible to vote. And in the event that we are going to have to vote, we shall release an electronic ballot. And on that ballot, we will have the country of each candidate. And the members will then have to select their preferred candidate and submit. Then we will tally and announce the results through the support of our ICT officer, Mr. Ronald. With that understanding, honorable members, are there any questions before we proceed to conduct the elections? I don't seem to see any question, and I wish to indicate to honorable members that...
I've got a question.
Yes, Honorable Martin.
Yes, I was just checking. The only people I can see are these ones that have switched on their videos.
Yes, sir.
Which other countries do we have so that when we start the nominations, we are sure we are nominating? Or are we allowed to nominate even people who are not there? I don't know. Yeah, you can explain that procedure as well.
Yeah, sure. In terms of nomination, as long as a country, the member's country is eligible, they can be nominated, seconded, and be elected. The second question that the chair asked in terms of the members that are on, let me just confirm. I see Honorable Tumba from DRC, Honorable Carlos Manuel from Mozambique, Honorable Majaga from Botswana, Honorable Anquake Quetley from Mauritius, Honorable Mative from South Africa, Honorable Tepang from Lesotho, who is a proxy and enjoys the full rights of a substantive member. So these are the ones that I see: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We had honorable, in between we had honorable, the proxy from Eswatini. I don't know what has happened. Probably might have gone in and out.
Data shortage.
So, Chair, those are the members we have. So, honorable members, as I indicated, we shall now proceed to receive nominations. We want to receive the nominations on the floor of the House. And when there is a nomination, it is procedure that that nomination must be seconded before we admit it as regular, and then we will proceed to receive further nominations before we start the election process. So for the position of chairperson, honorable members, I wish to request if there are any nominations. And honorable members, feel free to use your video screens to communicate with the presiding with the returning officer. I may not be able to see when you raise a hand, but feel free to speak on through your mic, and I'll be able to hear you. So may I receive any nominations for the position of chairperson? Honorable Mative.
Thank you very much, presiding officer. I nominate the name of Honorable Leon Tumba from DRC.
I have a nomination for Honorable Tumba from DRC for the position of chairperson. Honorable members, is there a seconder?
I second the nomination, Chair.
I have received a seconding of the nomination for Honorable Tumba's candidature, and therefore Honorable Tumba's candidature has been stated on the ballot paper. Are there any further nominations, honorable members? I see Honorable Carlos from Mozambique. Honorable Carlos, your mic is mute. Honorable Carlos, your mic is mute. Please unmute your mic.
Simplesmente para secundar essa nomeação. Obrigado.
Hello.
Thank you very much. I've received a further secondment of the nomination of DRC by Mozambique. Is there any fresh nomination for the position of chairperson other than Honorable Tumba from DRC? Three, is there any further nomination for the position of chairperson for the committee other than the candidate from DRC? Two, honorable members, I wish to know if there is any further nomination for this position of chairperson. Honorable members, Honorable Tumba stands as the only candidate nominated and seconded for the position of chairperson for the Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources. And in terms of the Constitution and the rules of procedure of SADC-PF, Honorable Tumba is duly elected unanimously as the chairperson for the Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee for the period 2020 to 2022. Congratulations, Honorable Tumba.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Most welcome. Honorable members, we should proceed to receive nominations for the position of Vice Chairperson. And I wish to remind honorable members regarding the requirement for gender principle, whereupon the rules provide that if a chairperson elected is a man, the vice chairperson must be a woman. With that in mind, honorable members, I wish to request for nominations for the position of vice chairperson. And let me also remind the honorable members, the eligible countries, they are Angola, Botswana, Eswatini, Madagascar, Malawi, Mozambique, Seychelles, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Is there any nomination for the position of vice chairperson?
Chairperson, just a point of clarity.
Sure, Chair.
Yes, I wanted to check. We might not be able to know whether, because we'll be nominating in terms of the country,
yes,
the people who are here are ineligible, all of them who are women who are supposed to nominate them. So those who are in other countries, we might not be able to know whether they are men or women. If you can assist us in that regard, then we can be able to nominate.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me respond to that request. So the countries that have female MPs that are eligible, Angola is a male MP in the committee, Botswana is a male MP in the committee, Lesotho is a female MP in the committee, oh really?
Is Lesotho?
Sorry, Chair, I'm just being corrected that Angola actually has a female member in the committee, Honorable Helena Bongela. Then in terms of, I mentioned Eswatini. Eswatini has a female MP. Madagascar has a male MP. Malawi has a male MP, and Mozambique has a male MP. Seychelles is a female. Tanzania is a female, but is outgoing because of elections. Then Zambia is a female MP, and Zimbabwe is a female MP. Let me try and assist the committee by highlighting those countries that have female MPs from amongst the list chair, if that might help.
Yeah. Okay. You must highlight first, and I wanted to choose Lesotho, but we must highlight first, like he's saying, because
Yes.
other countries we know have been in this committee. There was a female being a chair in Zimbabwe. There was a female in previous, because we are coming for another session in this committee.
Mm. Right. Honorable members, I've highlighted the countries that have female MPs in the committee, and I hope that should facilitate us to be able to see who is a female member from among the membership. Having done that, honorable members, let me now open for any nominations for the position of Vice Chairperson. Honorable Majaha.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to nominate Lesotho.
There is a nomination for Lesotho for Honorable Marapeleng Malefane, who is a proxy standing in for her, Honorable Tsepang. Honorable Mative, I see your hand.
I'm seconding.
So Lesotho has been seconded. Honorable members, I wish to receive any further nominations for the position of Vice Chair. I see DRC Honorable Tumba. Honorable Tumba, you have the floor. Please unmute your mic. Honorable Tumba, please unmute your mic. Thank you.
Yeah. A second Lesotho as well.
Seconding of Lesotho. Lesotho has been seconded, and therefore the candidate from Lesotho has been inserted on the ballot paper. Honorable members, I wish to receive any further nominations for the position of Vice Chairperson. 3. Honorable members, I wish to receive nominations for any further nomination for the position of Vice Chairperson for the Funding Committee. 2, I wish to make a last call requesting honorable members to make a nomination for the candidate of Vice Chairperson for the Funding Committee for the period 2020 to 2022. Honorable members, I have not received any further nominations. And therefore, in terms of the rules of procedure and the constitution of SADC PF, I wish to declare Honorable Marapeleng Malefane, who is represented in this meeting by a proxy, Honorable Tsepang, to be duly elected as the Vice Chairperson for the Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources Standing Committee of SADC PF for the period 2020 to 2022. Thank you very much. Honorable members, on that note, let me now have the honor of inviting before I invite the chair to take the seat, let me invite the Vice Chairperson elected, represented by a proxy, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you very much for having presided on the elections. Ndate Kurasha. I stand here on behalf of Honorable Mara Elang Malefani, who is my colleague in the Parliament of Lesotho, for whom I'm the proxy in this meeting. And I wish to convey our greatest thanks to you, honorable members, for having considered Lesotho to take this position of a vice chair. And hopefully we will do our best to carry out the functions that will be bestowed upon us as a country, working together in collaboration, especially now with the COVID-19 rearing its ugly head in our midst. And the presentations that we've had yesterday and today have really formulated a direction that we need to take. And for us, I think it's sort of starting afresh as a region. And under the leadership of the newly elected chair, we promise to work hand in hand and guide the committee to achieve its mandate into 2022 elections, when we next sit again to have the next elections. Thank you so much for this honor.
Thank you very much, Honorable Msena. I now have the honor and pleasure of inviting the chairperson, Honorable Tumba. Honorable Tumba, you will say, you address the committee and proceed to close the meeting. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dear honorable colleague, dear all. I want to say what is enormous privilege and an honor it is to be trusted by you as a chairperson in Farm Committee in SADC region. I'm deeply conscious of that privilege and this honor at this time. I'd like to thank everyone who voted for me, and also I'm surely that I'll be very busy. I'll be working hard in order to push up our committee forward, especially in SADC region. Once again, thank you so much. May God bless SADC. Thank you.
You're welcome, Chair. The Chair may proceed to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you so much. That was a very good opportunity for this meeting, and working hard in weeks to come, especially or maybe particularly in this time of good luck and all the best. Thank you so much. Now the meeting is ended.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, honorable members. All the best.